WebPunch. Today, just keep in mind that everyone is muted. So we ask that if you have any questions on our session today, there is a little question area on the GoToWebinar control panel, in which you can type in your question, and I'll address those as needed during the appropriate time in our conversations today. Now, as we go through here as well, keep in mind that this is being recorded. So this session will be made available following today's session and will be posted out on Gateway as well as on the EPAY area of YouTube. So what we're doing is putting them on YouTube, allowing you to go out there and search just a simple phrase, EPAY for ISS Facility Services, and it'll bring up a whole listing of all the sessions we've recorded, including our weekly or bi-weekly, or twice a week EPAY changes, tips and changes sessions as well. Now for today specifically, talking about WebPunch, we're going to break it out into small chunks and kind of go through the general WebPunch process. So we're going to start with a quick system overview so everyone understands where WebPunch falls into the big picture. We're going to go review some common system terms, and these are terms that you'll see on a day-to-day basis, not only on Blueforce but in WebPunch. So this will come in handy for those users on the call today that are not familiar with the whole EPAY or Blueforce process. We'll then go through the demo, in which I'll show you a few slides, but more specifically go in and demo punching in, punching out, how to go in and take care of lunch breaks when you're on the clock. Go in there and show you how to change your job and your task. We'll go in there and show you how to allocate hours. And then we're just going to go through just real quick, I'll show you kind of the other functionalities that are in there involving timesheet schedules and how to go change your password. And I'll wrap it up with a quick slide on how to get support help in the future. So that's kind of what's on the tab for today. So let's get started, and probably won't go the full hour, but if need be, well, obviously we have plenty of time for questions, so please don't be shy. If you have questions, please use that control panel question area and ask away. So let's get started with our system overview. So for WebPunch, the system overview is essentially what you see here on the screen. You have Mobile Punch, which on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got a couple of different avenues to clocking in. There is the Mobile Punch, which is basically the app that you can load on your phone, your smartphone, to be able to clock in and clock out. So some of you on this phone call already use Mobile Punch, but if that's something that interests you as well, that is an option of punching in into the system. Mobile Punch uses some GPS technology behind that, so it actually knows if you're actually at the site or not. Phone in is also another popular one. Phone in is the basic phone system. Employees call a toll-free number. They basically ask for their employee ID. They choose to punch in or punch out whatever the action they need to do, and then they can actually clock into the specific job they're working at that particular time. The last one down here on the list is Walter, and Walter is our time clock. So some of you have seen our near 700 clocks we have around the country. So those clocks are hanging on some walls, and it goes up with their fingerprint, biometric functions off the, basically using their fingerprint, and their combination of an employee ID to basically clock in and clock out. And then obviously WebPunch is the fourth option. WebPunch, denoted here by a little laptop picture, really it's an avenue to clock into the system via the internet. So you can use this as a function to clock in off your computer, whether it be a desktop, laptop, whatever it may be. You can actually use WebPunch from any type of system like that. So we'll go through kind of the different scenarios of using WebPunch. All four methods here are valid for use immediately. A couple of these have some setups behind it to include WebPunch, so we're going to go through that as well today. But and as throughout the course of our discussion today, I'll show you how to request a user ID. I'll show you how to go in and actually make sure that you can actually log in to WebPunch as well. So we'll go through a couple of those setups, since many of you have never gone into WebPunch. So the way this works is kind of from a system overview point. These four time collection methods can be used to actually collect time, and all they do is they split that time into Blueforce. And Blueforce is the product that we actually log into as editors, submitters, and approvers, for those that are on the phone call that have those roles. So in Blueforce, obviously, that's where everything's being collected and everything's being populated. Now, from the JD Edwards side, JD Edwards actually then comes into play, and that JD Edwards is where everything starts. The employees start, the jobs start in there as well. The work orders will start in there as well. And what JD Edwards does is every 30 minutes it spits over the updates of records over to Blueforce. That way, giving you the new employees, giving you new jobs, giving you any updated information as needed for use in Blueforce. Now, at the end of the pay week, we actually export the time out of Blueforce back into JD Edwards, in which JD Edwards then uses it to basically process paychecks, direct deposits, and obviously we have pay cards as well. So those three methods of being paid out are being paid out to our employees. Now, one of the things that you may not be familiar with is that we actually have MyMCS accounts kind of in the process of being scooped up into this whole big process. So for those that use MyMCS out there, specifically the IFS division, we are looking at putting that into play for, I believe, the Barclays group and a couple of these IFS accounts out there as well. So that'll come down here shortly in the next couple months. So kind of with that, I just want to show you kind of a big picture of where everything falls in and kind of how everything flows through the system. Now, keeping that in mind and kind of going forward here, some of the common terms that you're going to be hearing me say today, and actually you'll be seeing as you use WebPunch. Now, obviously, the first one is WebPunch. And WebPunch, as I mentioned, is just a web-based method to report time and hours that is then sent to Blueforce. Once again, WebPunch is nothing more than clocking in and clocking out via the internet. Nothing more, nothing less. So WebPunch will give you the same functionalities that you see on the, for the most part, same options, same choices that you may see on the Walter, the mobile, and even on the phone in. Now, punch in, punch out, and lunch punches. Basically, the employees can clock in or out for the day or lunch using a clock, phone, or web as assigned. Now, now employees change jobs and tasks and work orders in real time using WebPunch. So one of the things is you can actually, from the WebPunch setup we have, you can actually go in there and make adjustments like allocations. You can actually go in there and change jobs if you plugged into the wrong job. I'll show you all that as part of our demo today. Now, add edit time card or hours allocations. Employees record hours for the day, and then they can allocate them to each job, task, or work order at the end of the day or at the end of the week. So at any point, you can go back in, and basically what I'm saying is at any point, the employee via WebPunch can go in there and allocate their time accordingly. Now, this is heavily done for the IFS team that's on this call today. We have this is heavily being done right now, especially on the HP side. So we're opening obviously WebPunch for everybody, but just let know that you can actually allocate time kind of an after-the-fact scenario. And the reason we say after the fact is because sometimes we are asked to do our one-time jobs, our above-base work, our specials, tags, all the different nicknames given to extra work. We're given the opportunity to do that kind of on the spot scenario where we may not have a work order set up in the system yet. So in those cases, employees can still clock in and clock out using WebPunch, but then we may want to allocate part of that time back to this particular work order. And that's kind of where I'm coming into this particular subject, where you can now do it kind of after the fact. So yeah, I clocked in at 5 p.m. and I clocked out at 10 p.m. and I need to allocate 2 of those hours to work order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once it's available in the system, then the employee can go back and do it themselves via WebPunch and allocate their time, or obviously someone from the editor, submitter, or even approver could actually go in there and allocate that beforehand. Conflict. Basically, when you hear the word conflict as it relates to WebPunch, is that employees are using the punch in and punch out and hour allocation for the same date. And this basically creates a conflict in which a conflict message will be generated, and typically a scenario like this would be because an hours overlap. So if you ever hear the word conflict, that's what it's entailing. Audit Trail. So everything we do in the system, as I've said on all our webinars as you may have joined, I always talk about Audit Trail. So everything we do is being tracked. So Audit Trail basically means it keeps track of any changes being made to an employee's time by the ID of the manager. So the way the system works is the minute an employee clocks in, that in punch is recorded in the system. Anything that changes to that employee's punches throughout, whether it be a manager going back in as an editor, submitter, or approver, going back in there and changing the time they punched in, or changing the job they worked, or allocating a work order, any changes occurring to that time will be part of this audit trail. So just know that. Then lastly, timesheet. Timesheet basically employee total hours for a reporting period. Time is also approved here, and sick or vacation time is added here as well. So we'll talk about timesheet as well. I think many of you are already familiar with the word timesheet as it is. So those are the terms I want to go through, and then quickly just recap the time collection methods that are available in Blueforce. Now we're talking about WebPunch today, but just so you know, there's the four methods here listed that I mentioned already. And just so you know, that the way the WebPunch works, it's basically goes off a URL, or basically internet address, in which it's validated by employee's username and password for Blueforce. So one thing I'll point out to everyone, just because you have a login to Blueforce doesn't mean you have a login to WebPunch. So what would happen as part of this process is you'd have to request a username and password. You'll have to request access to WebPunch. And once you have request that access, if you're already set up in Blueforce as a user, all we're doing is going to make those jobs available for you via WebPunch. So that's all we're doing on our end. You actually will use the same username and password as you do now for Blueforce. Now, if you don't have login ready for WebPunch, then we'd have to create that all from scratch. And once again, the only other criteria here is an employee uses a computer to log in to WebPunch. Now, someone did ask me recently if they could log in off their smartphone into WebPunch. Yeah, you could do that, but the screen is too small for WebPunch. And secondly, if you're going to do that on your smartphone, you might as well use the other app called WebPunch, which works a lot better from a smartphone standpoint. So just as a reminder, as we go through here and I go through the demo today, I got a few more slides here. But as I go through today, everything will be available on Gateway following today's session, as well as the video itself will be available on YouTube shortly after the call as well. So the question is, where do I get started? How do I get in here and start working with WebPunch? Well, the first thing is access for the user has to be requested. So there's two ways we request the access. It's going to be via Gateway, where we have a special form you can go out there and fill out and request the access, or you can do it via help desk request, which when you do the help desk request, we're going to need some information like the employee name, employee email address, and stuff like that. So I'll talk more about this a little later towards the end of our session today, where I have a slide that talks about these points. All right. So all the employees are going to use WebPunch on a day-to-day basis to punch in and punch out, and then also record meals as needed. So to that point, just like the other methods that we have currently in play, if an employee needs to record a meal break, they can go to the system and punch out for lunch, punch back, and return back from lunch in WebPunch. Now, if they have an automatic lunch deduction at the job level, then they don't need to do this. They just need to punch in and punch out on WebPunch. Same thing as the other methods. Nothing really is going to be different from that perspective. Now, employees always have access to WebPunch using the same URL. So once I'll show you the URL on the screen, you can also make it available following the session as well. You can actually go in there and just simply bookmark that URL. It's a long link, so I will provide it to everyone via email after the session today, as well as a copy of this documentation that I'm going through today. And you can have it, get to that site, and I would suggest you go ahead and mark it as a favorite or bookmark it, because I don't think you want to type this every time. And then as you use WebPunch, those punches and time entries are immediately available in Blueforce. WebPunch is pretty much a live system in which anything you do in WebPunch within a minute, maybe a handful of minutes, you'll have it in Blueforce available for your review as well. So to log in, what everyone's going to do is there's a nice little link here on the screen, www.blueforce.com/webpunch/V47. And I want to make point that many of you may already have gone through this session in the past, maybe as much as 9 months ago, maybe when we first started WebPunch. Many of you may have a link already on your computers. The key thing is to keep in mind is this V47. We are in the most recent version of WebPunch. So if you have an older version, it'll still work. The problem is you will not see a lot of the things that I'm going to show you today. This is a different link. So make sure that if you have this already, that you actually have V47 in the link. Otherwise, this is the new link that you will have to be using. And I can put there, please note this link was updated last in November of 2015. So you know best if you have the right link or not. And I'll show you this a little later in the session, and also, like I said, I'll email you this link after the call. All right, so let me go through a couple of talking slides, and then I'm going to actually go in and demo logging in, logging out of the system, and then actually go in and through and the whole punch in and punch out process. So as a user of WebPunch, keep in mind that everything you do in WebPunch starts by you taking this initial action of going to the login screen, and you notice it's a different login screen from what you're accustomed to in Blueforce. Okay, major difference. The link obviously is different, but you'll notice that the link itself, www.blueforce.com/webpunch versus /login, which is what you would normally see, when you actually go to a Blueforce session. Now, once you're in WebPunch here and you've actually logged in, what you're going to want to do now is you're going to go in from that home menu that's coming up here. You have the opportunity now to punch in and punch out, basically to start and end your workday. Now, as I mentioned, as you go through through your day-to-day process, you have the opportunity to then punch out for lunch. You can go and do other things, transfer jobs, all that good stuff. Now, one of the key things about this screen, and I'll show you here in a live demo, is that the punch in area here, where it shows punch in now, this bottom screen is always going to tell you what the next action, valid action, is for this particular employee. So as you clock in and clock out, or punch in and punch out to the system, this is always going to come and tell you what the next action is. So if you're already punched in, the system's going to know, and it's going to show you that or tell you that via the screens. And I'll show you that a little bit more detail here momentarily once we get to our demo. Now, once you punch in and out for the day, you're always going to get a confirmation. So every time you do something, you get a confirmation on the screen. Just like you see here, it shows that I actually punched into the job at a certain date and time and what my task was. So this is my receipt, kind of my confirmation that I am on the clock and I am accumulating time where needed. Now, as I mentioned, throughout the day, now I have the opportunity to go kind of mess around here. If I needed to go now and punch out and go home for the day, I have the option to punch out. But notice my options do change, like I mentioned. Now I don't have an option to punch in anymore because I'm already on the clock. It tells you at the top of the screen that I'm punched in as of a certain date and time. Now, from that, it also knows that the next valid actions are these down at the bottom of the screen. So it won't let me punch in again. It'll actually let me punch out. It'll let me go to lunch. It'll let me transfer, change tasks, stuff like that nature. So once again, from a WebPunch standpoint, it's very hard to mess up or get the next step wrong. And then just one thing I always mention is from a WebPunch standpoint is when you're actually in the system and you're trying to go in and do other things throughout your busy day, if you try to log in to the WebPunch and you leave the session open, the system's always going to log you out after 10 minutes of no activity. So it's a security feature in here, so we won't leave it open so someone else come right behind you and actually clocks you out or accidentally, does some other functions to your punches and whatnot. The system automatically knows that after 10 minutes of inactivity, it's going to log you out and make you log back in to be able to go to the next step in the process of WebPunch. So kind of with that, I think we've gotten a little basis to go in there and actually start playing around just a tad. I have a couple more slides I'll share with you here momentarily. So let me do this. I want to open up the WebPunch login screen. So you'll see here, one thing to point out for you, based on that link that I sent you or actually provided you here a little while ago, up at the very top part of the screen, you'll see that whole link at the top left-hand corner. So I'm showing my screen up there in the address bar, circled in green. Maybe a little faint to see, just depending if you can see it or not, at the top left-hand corner. That is the link right there, showing V47 as being the version 47 as the option there. So So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the login screen. I've used ISS as the company. That's what we're always going to use. You're going to enter your login ID, whatever it may be, and then you're going to go in and enter your password. Now, the password is whatever you have set up for yourself in the system. The password is case sensitive. Keep that in mind. So if you ever forget it, we will have to go from that screen. There's an option that says forget password. You can go back and have the system generate a new system password, and then you go in and log in. Now from the WebPunch initial home screen here, you will see that you have a couple of different options to play with. So as an employee, once again, WebPunch is really just an avenue to punch in and punch out. This is not, and I repeat, this is not an avenue for the submitters to go in here and submit time. This is not an avenue for approvers to go and approve anything. This is strictly used for a clock in, clock out basis. So being that you might be an editor, a submitter, or approver role, you can log into WebPunch and punch in and punch out as other employees do. However, like I mentioned, you're not going to be able to come in here and see other employees' times and kind of mess around with their approvals and submission of time, all that good stuff. So from the home screen, obviously it's going to tell you right at the get-go, it's going to tell you your name or whatever may be up here at the top of the screen. For me, from today, I'm using a example of a webinar employee that I've used for test purposes. You're going to be prompted with a job. So the job here allows you to decide, what job you want to actually go in there and clock into. By default, it's going to show you your default job first. So WebPunch always shows your default job on the list first. At which point then you can then pick a task, and then you can actually go and pick a work order. Now, the way this works is you have a drop down on the job field. So if I have to pick a different job, I can go through here and pick any of the different jobs that I have access to. This employee has quite a few different jobs he wants to be able to work at, so these are all listed there. For those editors, submitters, and approvers on today's phone call, that job listing is driven by the employee's working jobs on the Working Jobs tab on the employee profile in Blueforce. So if you want employees to be able to select other jobs, then you have to make sure they're available on that Working Jobs tab in Blueforce. Now, next thing is tasks. The list of available tasks to the corresponding job selected will then be made available to you. So obviously keep in mind I have 4 for this particular job. However, I may pick a different job altogether. And when I pick that other job, I come down to the drop down. Notice I have a lot more tasks I can pick from for that particular job. So that makes a difference, just making sure you have the right job selected in the first place. Now for my example, I'm going to keep my default job, my main office, as is a test job, so I don't want to mess with any live jobs that are in the system. Can I limit the job list? So once again, yeah, you can limit the job list. That is controlled by that Working Jobs tab. So if you want, if you have an employee that works 20 different jobs on a day-to-day basis, then you want 20 different jobs in that Working Jobs tab. If they don't work the 20 different jobs, then you have the opportunity just to make those available and remove them as needed from the Working Jobs tab in Blueforce, or just leave them there the whole time. It doesn't hurt for the employee to have more jobs than they need. The only problem is it just takes them a little longer to scroll through these. Just basically give them the convenience to be able to select the job they need when they need it. So that's a good question. All right, so kind of furthermore with that, I picked the task I want to use. I'm going to use custodian for this particular task example. And then you have work order, in which now I can have a drop down and pick a work order associated to the job that I'm trying to punch into. Now, the work orders I have here are just example work orders, but if I knew this is one of the work orders I needed, I could quickly click on it and automatically the time would be going to that work order job combination. If I didn't know that work order just yet, maybe it's not created yet, but I need this employee to get started, I could leave this field blank. There's no reason why I can't leave it blank, and then hit punch in to go ahead and punch in. What's going to happen here is that punch in is going to go ahead and start accumulating that time, and then you come back after the fact and allocate that time accordingly. So the employee can come back in to his time card and allocate that time as needed. Now keep in mind, if that employee comes back later and reallocates that, the system is going to note that the employee came back later, part of the audit trail, and note that he made a change that included a change to the job that he was working, or to the job work order that was assigned. Now keep in mind here that you have those three of the key fields that you have to worry about. The fourth field there that says enter note for this transaction, that gives you the opportunity to go in and put a little note or a description up to 450 characters as to what may have occurred. Now we're not using that too much, but that does get tracked as part of this whole process as well. The last thing you'll have to do is come back to the very bottom of the screen once you have a job and task at a minimum, and then also maybe if you have a work order, come down here and just simply click on punch in. So I will tell you everyone right off the bat that if an employee clocks in or logs into WebPunch, it's going to work their default job, the default task should automatically pop up there. So really there may not be nothing for them to do at the screen. All they're going to do is come back over here and click on punch in, and then the system's going to automatically register the punch in and give them a successful message saying that they have punched in this case, February the 10th at 1:27 p.m., whatever their local time is on that machine. Once they're done at this point, they can click on log out, or they can go back to the punch page. If I go back to the punch page, this is taking me back to where I just came from, giving me the opportunity to do other things like maybe change to a different job, go and put the work order in now, stuff of that nature. If I say log out, no big deal. It's going to take me back out, take me back to the login screen. I can continue on my day, and then maybe lunchtime comes around, I have to clock out for lunch. I just go back into that WebPunch link, put in my credentials, log me in, then I at that point have my next option as to what I want to do. So that's easiest part of the system is clocking in, punching into the system. Now I'm going to use back to punch page for our example today because I don't want to actually log out and log back in. But once I log out, log back in, or just go back to the punch page, either way, I'm going to get the same window that you see here in front of you. Now, one thing you'll notice that's different about this, it's going to tell you at the top of the screen what exactly you last did. So if I punched in at 1:27, I came back in, I'm ready to punch out at 8 o'clock tonight, it's going to tell me, welcome, it's going to have your name. It's going to tell you that you are punched in as of that certain date and time, so you know that you're on the clock. What you're going to need to do is you pick one of the options at the bottom of the screen as your next valid point or step of the process. So I've punched in. The next thing that I can do now is either A, I want to punch out, B, I want to actually punch out for lunch, maybe it's lunchtime for me, I want to change my task, or I want to transfer to a different site. So just like you would do on phone in or go into the Walters or even the mobile to go to a different job, I could do it here from this particular screen. Before I do any of those other functionalities, I'm going to go first over at punching out for lunch. So let's say I can now go, it's lunchtime, I need to punch out for lunch. What I'm going to do is right there with that little link that's circled, all I'm going to do is go in, click on punch for lunch, punch out for lunch, and you'll notice the screen is going to give you a confirmation once again, letting you know that you successfully clocked out for lunch at a certain date and time. Now, the difference between clocking out and punch out and punch out for lunch is this. If you are punching out for lunch, the system recognizes that and will actually note lunch on your time card. It's an unpaid time frame, but it shows you the actual lunch time on the employee time card. If I just hit punch out, the system says, okay, I'm done for the day, boom, stops your time, and then you would have to come back in and punch in from scratch like we did a while ago to continue your day or to go clock in the next job, or in essence just to basically start the meter running again. So that's really the major difference. Punch out for lunch records that lunch time that you were actually at a lunch or you on lunch. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you're using automatic lunch deductions on your jobs, the employee does not need to punch out for lunch. The system will automatically deduct that half hour, whatever it may be, based on the rule that we have set up in the system for you. All right, so moving on here. So let's say lunch is over. I need to come back to work. Come back to my laptop, or the computer, wherever the kiosk, whatever it may be. I actually log back in. At this point, notice there's only one option on the screen for me to do, and that is to now return from lunch, because we told the system we punched out for lunch. And so in that, the only valid option now is return from lunch. So this web punch makes it very simple for the employee. I come back in here, I'm going to keep updating job and task the same, return from lunch, boom, it's there. I am now punched back in and on the clock. So the way this process will continue to go, it's one vicious cycle, like I always say. The system will not let you mess up here. So now that if you punched in, and there's my message saying I need some activity, I'm just punching in and punching out, and that really is not really active in the system. It's just really I'm just going and recording steps. If it wants you to actually go in there and do stuff in the system. So if you get that message on a word, just know it's going to probably log you out here in a little bit, like it just did. So I'm punched back in. I'm active in the system. I'm going in, working, and now it's time to punch out for the day. So just as I did before, I'm going to log back into the WebPunch system. It's going to take me to that home screen. The home screen always tells you what the last action you did was. And at that point, I can now click on Punch Out. Okay. Now, I'm not going to punch out just yet because there's a couple other things I want to mention about this screen. Many of you will punch in on WebPunch, but maybe you go out to the job site and need to clock out. And there's no computer there, but there is a mobile device, or there's a Walter time clock, or there's the phone system. You can go to those avenues and actually clock out if you need to. And the system should pair those up accordingly. But it is recommended that if you use WebPunch or punch in, you can just use WebPunch to punch out. Keep it simple. But if you need to go to the job site, once again, you can use the time collection device at that site to record your punch. Now, from this perspective as well, like I said earlier, you have some other options. Like if you notice here, I'm currently I'm a custodian task right now. But maybe I need to change that. Maybe I'm going to be the supervisor this afternoon at another job site. So one thing that you want to do to keep in mind if I'm saying another job site is you have an option here called transfer to a different site. What that allows me to do is now go to a different site. So the system basically says, all right, I'm punching on this particular job A. As soon as I go and hit transfer to a different site, I'm going to be able to pick my other job and transfer to job B. Now, this has a cool little piece to it because if I hit that transfer to a different site, I'm currently logged in as job my office. So that's my main office, is the main job I'm working right now. But the minute I click on to transfer and hit the drop down, notice I no longer have my main office as the option of choice here because the system knows that I'm already clocked in there. So I can't clock into that same job again. So at this point, I can go through the list to look for the other job I want to transfer to at this point. And once I pick that job, then I get the drop down, pick the task that I need to work associated to that job. Once again, there's a work order. It'll be available here like it is on the screen now. I can choose it from this screen, or I can do it later, which I'm going to choose to do it later. And then I'm going to hit punch in. And I am done. The system now knows that I have now punched in to 10:10 marker, which is my job B, my second job of the day. And now I'm my cleaning supervisor. So if there's any rules, any rates, or anything that changes because of that task, it's now being applied because I chose the new task. So this is like a vicious cycle. I will continue the day throughout going here. I'd go back into 10:10 market, work there for however long I need to. And if I need to transfer again to a different site, or maybe transfer back to my original job, I could always come back in here, click, transfer to a different site, come back over here and pick my original job, and it's probably not even in order here. So now I'm going to have issues finding it. So it's in alphabetical order, but nevertheless, I can go back and transfer a different site there. I can actually go in and change my task. Let me go back a screen. So if I need to just simply change my task, right now I'm a cleaning supervisor, but now I need to change myself to a carpet tech, I could click on change task and simply go in and change the task that I need to reflect the proper task. Now by default, the system will automatically show you your default task as well. So the system is trying to help you because we've told it done a lot of setup. We've told said the employee works this particular job and it's their default task. And when they work this other job, this is their default task. The system's automatically going to default that information for you as best as it can. And then once again, I just hit punch in, and now I've punched in and changed my task to carpet tech. So this is like a vicious cycle, like I mentioned, as you continue throughout the day, throughout that shift. Once you're done, I can always come back to the screen here and click on punch out. And punch out essentially ends the day, ends your time collection, and then you obviously now can rest assured the employee has punched in and punched out. Now the system, as I mentioned, as soon as I punch out here, within a handful of minutes, the system will then update that information over to Blueforce. So if you're at the office, if you're at home, wherever you may be, and you're looking for reports on employees or trying to see who's still on the clock, who's gone home for the day, you can always go into Blueforce and validate that information because it's going to be accurate within, like I said, a few minutes. So those functions right there that I showed you are essentially what you would do on a day-to-day basis as an employee to punch in, punch out, or have your employees punch in and punch out on WebPunch, but more so kind of the general functionality of some of the different options you're going to see in WebPunch. Now everything I've shown you right here, should you get lost within the actual WebPunch application, it's all visible via the first link on the left-hand menu called Punch In, Punch Out. That is basically what triggers that home screen that you have here in front of you. Now, other options there in the left-hand column, menu options. Second one would be Add Edit Timecards. Now, Add Edit Timecards allows the employee to go in and actually see the time card punches that they just did, sort of like you would do as an editor, submitter, or approver in Blueforce. The employee can see it from that end, and I have the ability to allocate time as needed. I'll come back to that here in a little bit. My timesheet allows you now to go in and actually see your timesheet, summarized hours for the day. So an employee kind of has this employee using WebPunch has a leg up on the other time collection methods in that they can actually go in and see from a summary standpoint what exactly is going on hours. So he can see on Monday I worked 5 hours, on Tuesday I worked 6.25 hours, on Wednesday I worked 3 hours, and so forth. So those are the two links that I will address in here shortly, kind of from an overall overview standpoint as to how to use those two links. Now on this menu there are some other options that are being used now, such as request PTO and PTO balance history. These two down here, we're not really pushing those just yet, but if you are in WebPunch, employees can actually request time off via this link. That's one of the avenues of doing that. So by going to WebPunch and go to that link and request it, the employee, the supervisor on the other side would be notified via Blueforce where they can now go and approve that time off. So that's some functionality. That's something that we hope that we'll get everyone to start using down the road here. But right now, it's available. If you want to use it, it's there. But we're not really enforcing it from an ISS standpoint. And then you also have the PTO balance and history. So at any point, you need some help with balancing or what your current balances of PTO time is. You can see it there on screen, or the employee can see it on screen. The last two links down at the very bottom are change password and help and training. Change password is just what it says. You can change your password. And the help and training, there is if you click on that, it actually gives you some videos that you can actually watch to show you how to operate within WebPunch. And these are canned videos from EPAY, so you can watch those. There's one function that I'm going to show you here in allocations that is not available on that video. So it'll obviously be recorded, be part of this recording, but nevertheless, the video you watch there is something from EPAY. It's not something that we put out. All right, so before I go in and show you the add edit time cards, I want to bring up allocating time. So one of the things that I mentioned, employees punched in and punched out. So if I punch in at 5 p.m. and I punch out at 5 p.m., punch out at 10 p.m., I have 5 hours worked. But now I need to show that those two of those hours are going to fall under a particular work order. So to keep that in mind, You can always go in into the Add Edit Timecards area to allocate time as needed. I'm going to show you that here shortly. And for base janitorial users, most of the Blueforce users on there on this phone call are going to go through the process of creating a JDE work order. So you may not have access to JDE, but someone in your office does. I'm going to make sure that that work order is created first. The JDE work order that has been assigned, then it's going to be made available to Blueforce via interface within 30 minutes. And then keep in mind that work order is used for proper coding of OTJs, specials, tag work, etc. All the different words to name to kind of denote extra work. And allocate by selecting the work order in Blueforce. And this is basically off a time card or timesheet view. And I'm going to show you where you can actually do that in Blueforce as well, if you are maybe doing this from an editor, submitter, approver side of the ball game. Now, the other method, obviously, for allocating time will involve the IFS user. So I'm going to address the IFS team real quick. Generally, for them, you have a little bit more steps because you do an A/B quote there on the IFS side. So the customer then approves the quote before you are asked to email Janice or Yolanda here at our corporate office with your IFS team to go in and receive a JDE work order number. They in turn email that work order number to you, so they're the ones that actually set up this information in JD Edwards. And then you allocate by selecting the work order still, and then just keep in mind that you're still doing the AB logs manually at the time being as you've been doing. So a lot of the process there from the IFS side still remains the same, but just keep in mind you actually deal with someone here at the corporate office to set those up for you. Once again, this is IFS only. So I'm going to go back to my to my WebPunch login, and I'm actually going to go now to Add Edit Timecards. Now, Add Edit Timecards is a nice little link on the left-hand column, as you see here on the screen. So from that standpoint, I go into Add Edit Timecards, and I can now go to here and see that I have my time currently showing for a particular reporting period. Now, the reporting period that I have selected at the top of the screen, by default, is 2/6 through 2/12. So the system automatically is going to show you the period that's currently active, and you will actually see the time that I just collected a while ago. All of 2 minutes is what I did with playing around the system. So kind of what this screen will tell you, you notice at the very top of this particular grid, there are two little tabs. One of them is grayed out, one of them is in white. The two tabs, the first one says Add Edit, the other one says Allocate. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to be focused on the Allocate side, because at this point the employee is actually punched in and punched out, but now we want to obviously allocate that time. Now, the reporting period can be changed if you want to go back and say it's the start of the next week already and we want to go back to last week's time to allocate it accordingly. We can always hit the drop down and go back and allocate as needed. Now, keep in mind that once that time frame has been submitted, approved, and obviously exported out to JDE, there is none of this changing being able to go back and reallocate anything, because it's already done. As far as Blueforce is concerned, we are done in Blueforce. JDE is now in charge to pay the employee. So it's very critical that we actually go back and make sure that all the allocations are in place as you need them before you go in and submit and approve. And I can't stress that enough. They have to be in place before you submit and approve. So I know we have deadlines to make as far as payroll goes, but at the end of the day, if you want to make sure stuff is coded correctly from a GL standpoint, once again, has to be done before you submit and approve. So this whole kind of reiteration of submitting and approving, it lends credence that you have to go in on a daily basis and review your time. I mean, that's the best way to do this. Follow the general process and recommendation to go in when you get in your next business day and to reflect, review, and kind of reflect on all the time that's been worked the day before or the day or in the days that you were maybe out, and go through and make sure everything is corrected at that point. And we don't wait till last day of the pay period or last 19th hour of trying to process payroll before you actually go and make any changes, because then everything will be backed up on you. Now, for this particular screen, you'll notice that I did punch in and punch out at 134 to 136. the system will automatically show me the job that I actually worked at. Now this kind of is broken out, it's a little different, so don't panic when you see this. It shows job up there, it shows you a reporting period, and then of this job, it shows me that I worked my 2 minutes on this job for this particular day. Now obviously that wasn't the only job I worked at, so if as an employee, I could actually come in here, hit the drop down, pick the other job that I worked at during that time frame. And it wasn't Alamo Cafe, let's see, it was my main office, sorry. I can then see the punches for my main office there as well. So you do see the full picture, you do see everything as has occurred for that particular job on this particular setup. So once again, the employees have access to seeing their punches with the actual raw punches in and out on this screen. Now, the other tab is a tab that they would probably be working on if they wanted to go in and allocate time. So this next thing I'll talk about right now is how to allocate that time. So what allocate basically means is I have time that I've accumulated that I want to hit a particular work order, or I want to make sure it hits a particular, more times than not it's the work order level, but I mean if I want to go in and change jobs, stuff like that, I can do that at this point as well. So let me clear my screen here, and I'm actually going to do this since this times I've accumulated on this call are very minimal, with a total of maybe about 6-7 minutes. I'm not going to be going off of this. I'm not going to be going off of this time. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go back up here to the reporting period, pick the prior reporting period, and hit search. And you'll notice here that I have time under Alamo Cafe as being time for this employee. Let's see. It's actually the prior period. Let's see here. Perfect. There we go. Okay. Now the blue color, just so you know, don't let that panic you or anything. The blues is just telling you that you have no allocations right now. So our goal is, if I'm going to allocate time from a visual standpoint, and I see blues here on the screen, that's just telling me none of my time has been allocated just yet. If I do see greens a little bit, the greens are going to tell me that I did allocate that time. That's where we're going with this particular process. So step one is I'm going to go over here, and when I pull up my screen here, you're going to see the reporting period being correct. That's what you want to allocate for. And then you're going to actually come down and click on allocate, the little allocate tab. Now the allocate tab has one cool little function. As I mentioned earlier, that if you're not running the proper version or not using the right link for WebPunch, you will not see this functionality. The functionality that I'm talking about is this right here. It's called allocation order preference. And the reason it's there, by default, it's going to show you job, task, and work order like it shows there right now listed. But notice that there's a little drop down. The little drop down arrow there is going to allow you now to change that preference to what we call work order, job, task. So the way this works is if I leave it the default job, task, and work order, the system will require you to go in there and put in a job. And then when you put in the specific job number, it'll then allow you to pick the task and associated work order to that job for allocation purposes. Now, if I do it the reverse route, which is work order, job, task, the system will allow me to now allocate via work order first. So it's going to provide me all the work orders that I have access to seeing as this employee. And then once I pick that work order, the system will go in and provide me the job and task as needed for that work order. The benefit of the difference between the two is that many of us around the country know our jobs and know our work orders, and that combination between that. Many of us also may not know the job information, and we focus on work orders only. So the other option here, work order, job, task, allows us to now have the system provide us the work order, and then in return the system will then pick out and automatically assign that job and task to the corresponding work order. So basically, one says you need the job, the other one you don't need to know the job. That's kind of what it boils down to. So for example, let me show you the default setting. Default setting, job, task, work order. If we don't change that, when I come down to the bottom of the screen to click on allocate, and notice that every timeline here has a little allocate link here on the left-hand side of it. Okay, this is where you're actually going to allocate that particular time for that line in question. So if I wanted to allocate time for 1:30, which is the 30th of the first line of time, click on allocate, and this little grid comes up. Notice that the first column available on this grid is the job. Okay? So in saying that, I need to pick the valid job that I want to use, and then the system will then provide me the tasks that correspond to that job and the work orders that correspond to that job for me to select from. Once again, this is not a wrong way of doing this. It's a perfectly fine way. This is the default way the system is set up to do. So in saying that, the top of the screen already knows that we're looking for Alamo Cafe because we told that in the previous screen, right behind there in the grayed out area. So picking the job, then I pick the task, and then I will pick the work order. Once again, that's how I'll say this. Once again, if I'm picking the work order now, this is just saying that I need to know the job name, number, all that good stuff before I can pick a work order. Now, I'm going to close the screen. I'm going to go back to allocate. Actually, so I take it back. I'm going to close the screen. I'm going to change the order preference to work order job task. Then I'm going to go in and click on allocate now. And when I do it this way, notice the system screen is different. WebPunch is going to provide you an area to pick the work order, and then it in turn will provide you the job and the task associated to that. Now, I default to something right now because that is the job we were working with a while ago, but I may not have a specific job selected on the previous screen. So in those cases, the system will now provide me a listing of all the different work orders that I have available. And just to show you what's going to happen, I'll pick the wrong one here, the wrong work order. The system comes in here and automatically dumps in the job for me here. It corresponds to that work order. So I knew the work order as an employee. I knew the work order, but I didn't know the job that it associated to. So I could actually pick the work order. The system automatically will put in the job and that task by default for me. So either or is a way of doing this. I just want to point out as an introduction to these two screens that you can you can change up your column order in a way what is represented on the screen a little differently based on that option. Now, furthermore with that, once I've actually gone through on my first line here, I have a work order. I've assigned it went this route. The job automatically is selected. Then you notice that the system currently shows me that I have 5 hours for this particular time. Top of the screen shows me an in punch of 5 to 10, total of 5 hours. So what that basically means on my first line here, it's telling me that I have 5 current hours right here available for me. And then in the new hours column, I also have 5. The new hours is basically telling the system, of the hours that I've already accumulated in the system, I need to now allocate those accordingly. And right now in the new hours, I want to allocate 5 hours to that first work order line. So not only are you telling the system that, I originally clocked into Alamo Cafe, which is what's showing up in the gray area above, as a custodian, and I actually earned 5 hours. You're now telling the system in the lower half of this grid that I want to take those number of hours and spread it out to all these jobs or work orders down below. So to that point, I'm going to say that this work order that I worked on over at 1010 Market, I only need 2 hours of it to go to that job. So I can go ahead and just delete the 5 and make that a 2. Okay. And then I can now go into that second line, pick a different work order if I need to pick a different work order. In this case, it's going to go to, well, I'm just going to use sprinklers as an example. It's going to go to my main office. My task I'm going to use there is custodian, and I want the remaining 3 hours to go to that particular job work order combination. Now, at the end of the whole process here, you have to make sure that your current hours, meaning the hours that are already in the system, equal up to the new hours, which is the hours you've allocated on both sides. So basically you have 5 hours current and 5 hours in the new hours column, and you'll be perfectly fine. Once it's in balance, you can proceed. Each column has notes. If you want to go in and put notes, say special customer request, whatever it may be. These notes do get tagged along with the time punch. They don't print out on the check stub or anything like that. They just attach themselves to the time card entry in the system. So I'll put regular work on this one. Whatever note you want to put on there. And then I can hit save. Now when I hit save, the system will give you 2 Nice little green check marks in this case because I've actually have 2 lines are created and they are in balance. So the green check marks say they were successfully saved, and it's a good thing. If I have my totals or my 2 columns out of balance, maybe I've only allocated 4 hours and I'm missing an hour, or I somehow put in the wrong combination of jobs, work, whatever it may be, the system show you red X's there, and those red X's will basically tell you that you have to go back and fix that particular line. So kind of furthermore with that, once I've done the allocation piece there, I now have the ability now just to click on close because I've already saved it. Keep in mind, make sure it has green checks before you leave that screen. Once I hit close, the system will then show me that line as in green, letting me know that I've already allocated. That's what that green color means on the legend right above it. So as allocations is this first line that's in green. Now at any point, I can always go back in and click on View Allocation right to the left of that green line I just created, or just allocated for, and go in there and make edits if I need to. So maybe I've allocated it wrong. I can still go back in there via View Allocation and go and see what is allocated and then edit those lines as needed. So keep in mind, this screen will be used for the allocation piece. So allocations are a big deal because we have to make sure that the labor is coded correctly to those one-time job, those above base jobs, scenarios, and whatnot. So that's kind of the WebPunch process that we're going to go through. Essentially, as an employee, you're going to punch in. You'll punch out for lunch. You go in and, if you need to, punch back in from lunch, and then go and punch out for the day. In most cases, you'll punch in and punch out, and you're done with the whole process on a day-to-day basis. The allocation piece here gives you the opportunity now to have the employee go back and allocate as needed. Now, if you don't need to allocate or you don't want the employees to do the allocations, you would rather take care of that on your own as a submitter or an approver, what you can do, let's go here. Actually, I have it on my screen here. Sorry. There we go. So right here on my screen, as soon as it comes up, there we go. Log back into Blueforce, and I'll, as a submitter, I can always go back to the time card view, and I'm just going to just pick a random time here. But as a submitter, I can go back to the time card view and actually go and edit a time card. So I'm going to pick one of these time cards that's currently active here. This one's open right here. It's already complete. So if this particular employee, and notice who that is. It's an employee that just punched in today. It's the one I used. So I want to put the work order now to this one. I would just select that particular line, hit that little checkbox, come up to the top of the screen and click on Edit, select the time cards. And once I go in there, I'm not going to mess with the time in and time out. So you're going to be perfectly fine. You're not going to get audited. You're not going to get in trouble or get your hand slapped. All I'm doing here is going to the column that says Work Order and picking the appropriate work order. So the employee punched in and out 131 to 134 as we did today. I assign the right work order to it. And then the system reason code would be simply I'm correcting the codes as it relates to work order, WO. So doing it this way, once again, it's perfectly legal. It's perfectly fine. You're not messing with it, employee punches at all. All you're doing is making sure the system codes them correctly. So then hit save. I should get a green circle just like you see there on the screen. As soon as I get that green circle, I can close. And you'll notice that the employee record is going to be changed a little bit and that the color of orange will now appear in that work order column. And that's perfectly fine. That's just letting you know that there's been a change to that record. But once again, as long as we're not touching that employee's original punches, we are perfectly fine as from a legal standpoint. So that's how you would do it. You can also go to the timesheet view and do it there as well. Timesheet view, obviously, in Blueforce is a summary view. So what I'm showing here, if there's any employees on the phone, they're just worried about punching in and punching out, what I'm showing you here in Blueforce is not something you would actually do. This is something really held to the submitter and or approver, or even the editor, sorry. So from this screen, notice here that I have This is my lunch punch. Let me go back here. I messed that one up as an example earlier. But let me go and pick another one just so I can show you this, and we'll wrap up our call today. So from a timesheet view, same thing. If I ever wanted the timesheet view and make that change to a work order, keep in mind that if all this time needs to go to the same work order, I have a column here called work order, in which I could just click on edit on the far left-hand side of that line. So when I go in and click on that edit link, the system will then now provide me an opportunity now to go to the drop down and pick the associated work order on that line. Once I've done that, click on save at the far left-hand side, and I am done. So all in all, the allocations we can turn it back onto the employee to do that themselves, which we stress and let the employee do as much as possible. Or as a editor, submitter, or approver, you can come back into Blueforce and make those allocations via the time card or timesheet. So as I'm about to wrap up our call, I just want to mention that we've got the ways of, like I mentioned earlier, we can go in and sign up our employees via the gateway system, which is basically our SharePoint, our ISS internal SharePoint site. There's a long link there that you can actually use, and like I said, I'll provide this slideshow for everyone following this call. But once you get in there is a part of this section, there's a part called user request, in which you can click there to request that user request. Fill out the form. It notifies myself and Tiandra. We both know that there is a pending request out there. We'll go and set that up for you and get that employee rocking and rolling. Now, on the other side of the coin here, you can also go via a help desk ticket, in which you can just go to that link, fms.iss.biz/ISSUS. That'll actually open up a help desk ticket system, in which you can go in there and provide your information, but more importantly, provide the user's employee name, employee ID, and email address, and we'll get them set up in the system to be able to use WebPunch. So as I wrap up, as I always tell everyone, keep in mind that we are available for support. So if you have any issues, please put in a help desk ticket first. That'll go straight to Tiandra and myself. We are actually monitoring the queue on a constant basis. If it's after hours scenario, go ahead and contact EPAY support. They're open 24/7 and can assist you with WebPunch and also any other applications we are currently using. So with that, I want to say thank you for joining us today. I hope this webinar was eye-opening for everybody. I will make this available on YouTube shortly here in the next 15 minutes. It'll be out there available for you, as well as on Gateway. So if you have to fall back or want to watch this whole session again, you're more than welcome to do so. So with that, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you very much for joining us today on this webinar.